Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The Washington Post comes out swinging. Are you a useful idiot of Russia's alleged media conspiracy against the West? Remembering Fidel Castro and how he changed the world. And now it's time for the French to go to vote. Two crosstalk stories in the media. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Mark Sloboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. We also have Alex Crisafora. He is the director and a writer for theduran.com. And we have Xavier Moreau. He is the founder of the Center of Political Strategic Analysis, Stratpol. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Alex, let me go to you first, because this Washington Post story about this huge alleged global media conspiracy against the West is hard to comprehend. Give us a chronology of where we're at.
All right, so 3 weeks ago, this assistant professor, not even a professor of a university, came out with a list for her students. Masha Zimdars, I believe is her name.
And this was just fake news.
Yeah, and she warns her students to beware of fake news sites. And she lists about 100 sites on there. The LA Times picks this up, and it goes viral. It gets completely debunked and destroyed in the media. A week after that, the EU Parliament has a session, and they brand RT and Sputnik, along with ISIS-Daesh, as propaganda tools against the West. And to be aware of these propaganda tools, a dire warning of what's to come if people watch RT and Sputnik. Now we go to literally 3 days ago, and we have this anonymous group called Prop or Not, Propaganda or Not.
And they registered their website when? In
August 21st, and they had their first tweet on November 2nd. No one knows who they are. This is a shadowy group. No one knows who they are. And they come out with a list of 200 sites that they brand. Not only fake news, but they've also combined Russia into the mix. So it's fake news sponsored by Russia, which is meant to overthrow the U.S. government,
let's talk about the implications of it here. What's your reaction to all this, Mark?
Okay, well, first of all, I take a look at the websites that this Prop or Not includes on their list. This is a completely anonymous group. They don't say who they are. They don't present any credentials,
but
no
the
methodology.
Washington Post and other media give it credence. They give them legitimacy.
They gave them a global audience with this. Who they say are either active agents of Kremlin propaganda or useful agents, useful idiots of the Kremlin.
And they may be not even aware of it.
They may not even be aware of it. Are websites like WikiLeaks, The Drudge Report, one of the most popular news sites in the world, the Libertarian Raw Paw Institute and Zero Hedge, Counterpunch, Truth Out, Truth Dig, Antiwar.com. Basically, if you have ever expressed a position critical of U.S. foreign policy that at any time aligned with Russia, you are on this list. And they went a step further. They said anyone who writes for this or who shares this information online could be violating the Espionage and the Foreign Agent Registration Act. So all of you out there watching this, you're probably traitors.
So, Xavier, so this looks like a 21st century book burning exercise.
Yeah, I think, they understood that they have the choice between freedom of speech and Northern Korea. Because actually, they have not a problem with the Russian propaganda or with any propaganda. They have a problem with freedom of speech. And actually, I don't know what they try to do, because it will be counterproductive. What they do, it's stupid, because we know that you can't prohibit people going on the web. It's not possible. It's just ridiculous what they do. I don't understand what they want to reach.
What are they doing here? Because we have the legacy media in the U.S., in the West in general, and I'm looking at Brexit, and I'm looking at the presidential election. We have a President-elect Donald Trump here. You would think that they would start stepping back from their catastrophic coverage of the election. Their one-sidedness, their bias. I mean, it was a catastrophe. Their candidate didn't win. As a matter of fact, the coverage was so poor that it probably helped Trump. Okay, but they're doubling down. Alex, how do you explain it?
Well, they're definitely doubling down, and I just want to go off of what Mark said. TheDuran.com also made the list, and there was a tweet on November 25th from this group, Prop or Not, and basically what they said, after getting pressed by Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept to reveal who they are, they come out with a tweet, smiley faces, emoticons, a really very strange format for their tweet for such a professional organization. And they basically say, we will reveal, I'm going to paraphrase, we will reveal who we are once all the news outlets that are sponsored by the Kremlin reveal who they are. So I just want to say, here I am, Alex Christoforou, I write for the Duran. I'm not funded by the Kremlin. I'm not funded by the Kremlin. I have nothing to do with the Kremlin. We write stories.
You know, Mark, what's really strange here is that, there's a breakdown in logic here. So if you criticize American foreign policy, you are automatically an agent of the Kremlin. Is this the logic that they're running?
Of course, Peter. I mean, is that shocking you in any way?
Why not China?
Are you arguing against that?
Well, you can be a libertarian, okay? You could be a lot of different things, and but you're not necessarily tied to Russia.
The Washington Post really just embarrassed themselves and destroyed their own credibility with this fake news story about fake news. I mean, this is what they regarded as experts, tweets from this proper knot. Look at all the angry Putinists trying to change the subject. They're so very angry. It's cute, smiley face. We don't censor, just highlight. Or fascists, straight up mother F in fascists. That's what we're up against. This is what
we're up against.
This is these clowns. So I mean, this is a bunch of trolls on the internet who were promoted by the Washington Post, and it's really, I mean, they've tried this repeated narrative again. Russia is responsible for everyone who votes against the liberal establishment in the world.
What are they trying to achieve here?
They tried. They felt that they could smear the other side with this. They tried it in the Brexit campaign. They tried it during the U.S. election. They're trying it repeatedly in Europe. And every time it fails.
And what do they win? They always lose. They're on a real amazing losing streak right now.
It's like a psychopath projecting his sins on the other. Yeah. Because what the fake news are, they know that in Washington Post, believe me, or in CNN. And so, but it's really counterproductive what they do now. I can't explain it.
One of the people that the Washington Post actually relies on in this article with the fake news is a man named Clint Watts.
Right.
And so there's been a lot of research on this guy now.
From the foreign policy research.
Exactly. So Mark can elaborate, but he's pretty much a neocon.
This is a group that says they are proponents of the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia. Yeah. They want a Cold War between the U.S. and Russia.
Let's look at the timing here. Okay. Obviously, when we look at Brexit, we look at Trump, the legacy media has experienced epic fail. Okay. Is this the timing of it all? Alex gave us the timeline here. Is this to make sure that Trump doesn't stray from the current line vis-a-vis Russia? Because it looks very convenient right now that they're telling Trump right now, don't have any kind of dialogue with Russia. That would be in line with what you guys just said.
I would think that is actually too sophisticated an analysis. I think this is just an angry backlash from these figures within the United States.
The public is figuring this out. I mean, all of those websites, you're saying everybody that goes to those websites are traitors?
The problem is we are all rational here. So we can't, I think any of us can find an explanation of what they do, really, because we are too rational for that.
But if we go to the European Parliament resolution, there we see another story unfold, because we've got elections coming up in France, in Italy, in Germany. And I don't see this so much as it's a typical demonization of Russia. The resolution didn't actually do anything. It was toothless. It was basically just a condemnation.
There were more abstentions than anything else.
There were more abstentions and people who voted against it than people who passed it. But I don't see this so much as directed against RT and Sputnik, Russian media, which they compared to ISIS. I see this more as one political faction within the EU, the establishment, center-right, center-left, the technocratic neoliberal elite in the EU, Atlanticist in geopolitical orientation, that is losing their narrative, they're losing their grip on power, and they are lashing out at other political factions, right and left in the EU, trying to smear them ahead of these elections.
What a childish strategy, because it's not going to work out.
And here's another piece to the timeline, which is actually Jill Stein, who, when she was running for the presidency, she was, I don't want to say pro-Russian, but she was definitely...
she didn't have the typical narrative.
She didn't have the typical narrative. And all of a sudden now, she's coming out saying that she got the recount in Wisconsin. She's moving for a recount in Pennsylvania and Michigan. And she's saying that we need the recount because we see that there was peculiarities with the voting mechanism, maybe by hackers, maybe by Russian hackers. So all of a sudden, you also have Jill Stein kind of chiming into this whole little debate going on with Russia and voting.
Russia has this corner of the market for hacking. You know, I have a hard time believing that. I see all of this stuff as leaks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have some personal political respect for Jill Stein, but she's just doing this, I can only imagine, out of self-promotion. And it's really kind of bankrupt, and it's got a lot of problems. Nate Silver's 538 immediately came out and said, you know, the article and the people that are promoting this idea that there were irregularities, this is all actually easily answered away by the demographics of these particular. They've seen these patterns in elections there in recent memory.
But it's very interesting here is that we heard during the debates that it's somehow innately evil to question election results, and that's what they pointed at Trump. This is exactly, and the media is pushing this too. They love this story here again to delegitimize the election of Donald Trump.
But the U.S. are supposed to be the most perfect system, democratic system, and now they are exactly like in Ukraine.
I'm sorry, but the U.S. has a third world mechanism for elections right now.
But Peter,
hold that thought. We're going to go to a short break here, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on stories in the media. Stay with our team. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing some of the stories that have made a difference in the media. Okay, Mark, before we went to the break here, I guess I wanted to say the election still isn't over, I guess, huh?
Well, Peter, I want to point out that you and Javier, by questioning the sanctity of the U.S. democratic system, by saying that there's anything wrong with it, you are doing exactly what these experts accuse Russia of doing, of calling the U.S. Democracy into question. And you know, they're trying to degrade our trust in our democracy. I think the Democratic National Committee rigging their own primary did that pretty well on their own, not to mention the media coverage of this. But you're exactly right. The liberal media and the Democratic Party, the Clinton campaign, as the election days were closing down, they said that if Trump didn't accept the results of the election, that he would be damaging U.S. democracy itself. And of course, that's exactly what they're doing right now.
I must admit, at least Barack Obama has stepped away from that. Maybe he's doing one thing in entire 8 years he's been in office here. But he actually did something. Let's switch gears, gentlemen. Let's go to Cuba. Alex, when you look at your news feed and look at the death of Fidel Castro at 90 years, I guess that was the CIA's greatest plan, you know, wait for him to die, okay, after
the 638
times that they tried.
But what's interesting if you look at your news feed about the death of Fidel Castro, there's two different Castros that died. Either you loved him or you hated him. He was a revolutionary or he was a dictator. A very, very complicated figure. I have to admit that Fidel Castro, up until the moment that he died, he was the leader that was part of my entire life, very much part of my life growing up in America. He was always there, and every single president had to deal with him. But he left the world under his own terms and conditions.
Yeah. He outlasted everyone.
Yeah.
He outlasted everyone, and he was a figure that will go down in history as one of the greatest leaders, love him or hate him. The interesting part is that there are two narratives. There are people in Miami celebrating. They're out in the streets celebrating the death of Castro, and that's being televised all over the media in the U.S. And then there's the other side of Castro's death, which are, you know, people that are mourning in Cuba, people all over the world that are paying their respects to the leader.
Not just, you know, a generation, generations
of people. So you have two different narratives as to who Castro was and how people viewed him, but there's no doubt that he's going to go down.
He had a very specific persona in the United States because of the state of Florida. Always, you can't win the presidency without Florida. But Castro had an immense global attraction. He was the guy that fought the empire and won.
You know, I think something significant is that when the Catholic Pope and the Orthodox Church Pope decided to meet, they met in Cuba. Yeah. And if they did that, because they saw that Cuba should be a bridge between the two churches. So I think it's a result of the Castro politics to you know to show himself, to show Cuba like a third way to approach the political system, the
even
global
after
political
communism,
system.
The global communist movement collapsed.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Mark, it's, and again, we talk about demonization here. Here's a man, a politician that was in there for the long haul, and he was demonized through assassination attempts. And I think this is what gave him such a global appeal, is that he did succeed. He did do what he wanted to do, and he wouldn't submit. I mean, after all the pressure the United States put on Cuba, still does.
Yeah, I mean, Castro started out as a freedom fighter, a national freedom fighter against U.S. imperialism in Cuba, and only later, during the Cold War, turned to communism as you know, a structural and a geopolitical bloc. But he was one of the great, we talk about them in international relations, one of the great men of history. He single-handedly, will to power, changed Cuba, changed the world. And you're right, he exited 90 years old on his own terms after surviving some 638 U.S. assassination attempts. Even Obama was running through U.S. aid, was exposed running plots to destabilize Cuba in the last few years as he rhetorically tried
to warm relations.
But Castro left the country. It started out as a poor agricultural country, and you really have to compare it to the other countries in Latin America that have continued to be under the U.S. imperial jackboot, say Haiti, which has been invaded by the U.S. more times than you can think, Honduras. Free education up to the PhD level, free health care, lower infant mortality and malnutrition rates than in the U.S., and higher life expectancy.
It's very interesting that, you know, when the U.S. every election cycle say our health care system is broken, our immigration system is broken, our legal system, everything's broken apparently. But at this time, Cuba actually exports its model around the world.
And they did it under sanctions.
They export
under sanctions.
Under a blockade by the U.S., they export more doctors to the third world than all G8 countries combined.
But at the same time, and I'll show my age right now, is that we at the waning years of the Cold War, we saw Cuban troops fighting in Africa from a small island, a very small
defending
island.
Syria from Israel as well.
But actually, it's true that Cuba is a proof that sanctions don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it didn't work on Cuba, it could work on Russia.
Nelson Mandela credited that without Castro's help, he might not have seen the end of apartheid in South Africa, when the U.S. and the U.K. were still supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa.
You know, I'm afraid, you guys, we're not going to be able to go to the state of Florida for a very long time.
And the interesting point with Castro, he was defiant to the very end.
Yeah.
I mean, he sent a letter to his people literally a day before he passed away. He was defiant to the very end. I
want to talk about differential elections, but Mark, what's Cuba going to be like without the Castro?
Yeah, his brother will, of course, continue his legacy. He was a partner of everything. The real question is what happens. Raul is also aged. Will the Cuban Revolution continue? Castro's struggle, you know, his revolution is over. And Raul will pick it up for a short period of time, but then it's up to the Cuban people to decide their own destiny. Viva la revolución.
Okay. And if they open up those borders, we'll see a flood of Cubans from Florida going back to Cuba, maybe with their money. Who knows what's going to happen to the revolution?
Probably a Trump hotel, too.
Okay. Trump hotel will be there no matter what. Yeah. Xavier, let's talk about what's going on in France. Okay. We've said many times in this program, we've discussed Brexit, we've discussed the election cycle in the U.S. Now we have French voters going to vote in a primary. For Republican candidate and for a presidential election next year. Do you see the insurrection, that I call it, continuing? You know, these elites, they're very suspicious of democracy, but when you give people the ballot box and a ballot, they seem to always surprise the elites.
Yeah, in my opinion, the anti-system waves reached the French coast, and because we had our own Clinton, his name is still Alain Juppé, and they promised, I mean, the media, the system promised him the victory. it was sure he should be elected at 60%.
Oh, damn, those people are screwing it up again.
But it didn't work again. Okay, so François Fillon, who was supposed to be the third guy, got 44%, and Alain Juppé, the next one, 26%.
Is his attitude towards Russia overblown in the media?
I don't think it's not so significant.
Yeah.
But as soon as he was at the first place, all the media started to attack him. He's a friend of Putin. He's a fascist. He's an ultra-Catholic.
This happened to our political rhetoric. Everybody goes to the extreme in the first nanosecond of a discussion here.
This is what's driving the EU and the neocon establishment in the U.S. insane, is that the way they're reading the French election at this point, the only thing they're concerned about is whether Marine Le Pen of the National Front wins or the presumed frontrunner of the Republican Party, Fillon, wins. Either way, Russia wins. Putin wins another election, evidently, because both of them are in favor of restoring relations with Russia, something that these people will not accept.
Tell our viewers right now, how important is the French-Russia relationship important to the average French voter? Is that what they vote on? Or do they vote on other things?
No, we have many internal problems. But, you know, the most interesting thing, we know there will be already three candidates. Marine Le Pen, she wants to have normal relation with Russia. François Fillon wants to have normal relation with Russia. Mélenchon is an ultra-left side. He wants to have normal relation with Russia. So the system at this time has
the whole system is a traitor.
So, I know the panic we were talking about from the Washington Post, it's exactly the same in France now. You should read the French newspapers, listen to the French channels. They don't know who they can support because there is no system candidate now.
This is so interesting, is because the established liberal media in Europe and in the United States, they're the ones that are isolating themselves deeper and deeper and further away from the way people feel on the ground. And it's really extraordinary. Maybe that explains this whole post story.
Yeah, it's like the same playbook. They all have the same playbook. And the UK tried to run it. Don't vote Brexit because you're going to be playing into Putin's hand. They lost. Cameron lost. The U.S. and Hillary tried to run the same playbook. If you vote for Trump, you're voting for Putin. And now we see France running the same exact place. It's like they don't have a different script. It's like they all got the same script, and they don't see it. They're losing.
We already saw this movie.
Twice.
I know the ending. I know the ending.
Exactly. I think we are going in a new era. When you get support from the media, you are going to refuse it. Please don't support me, okay? I am going to win by myself.
Okay, 40 seconds on. This is kind of interesting because it's like kryptonite. You know, everybody. You know, you're going to lose when you encounter it. Go ahead.
All I can say, if the long arm of Putin can reach out through his sophisticated propaganda machine, which I guess includes all of us here and all of you out there watching, if he can reach out, control referendums in the UK, the outcome of the election in the world superpower, hyperpower, the United States, elections in France, Bulgaria, Moldova, and the rest of EU is threatened. All I can say is you had better just give up and surrender and declare Putin the overmaster of the world, because obviously you're overmatched.
You know, I really would like to know what's going on in the Kremlin, how they're reacting to all this.
I would imagine they're laughing.
What else can you do but laugh?
Hashtag pass the popcorn.
Yeah, eating popcorn.
I mean, you go on Facebook and you see the comments, you know, for the articles that we write, and everyone's laughing.
We're out of time, guys. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules. Fake news. I love you.